going to address this very important issue, which is the transition that we face when we're a specialist, going from being a professional and a specialist that's focused on our task, from going to be a manager who has to manage people. This is a huge shift for many people. How many of you have actually seen this within your companies to be a critical moment when people shift to becoming a manager? Just raise your hand if you find that this is a critical moment. Okay, good. I see a good percentage of hands in the room. So we're going to address this issue, talk about why this happens, and relate it to emotional intelligence. So we're going to talk about the components of emotional intelligence. How many of you already know about emotional intelligence? Maybe you know everything about emotional intelligence. Just raise your hand. You're an expert on emotional intelligence. Okay, we have actually a couple of experts in the room. Excellent. So we're going to be reviewing for you, or you're going to be assisting me in explaining, which is fine too. And we're going to be talking about how we can actually measure emotional intelligence. And this is an important thing, because we know now that emotional intelligence is something that we can all learn. It's a set of competencies, a very wide range of competencies that we can all learn and improve our whole career and in our life in general, because quite honestly, emotional intelligence is something, a skill or an ability that assists us in every aspect of our life. And then finally, we're going to talk about how can we develop and increase our emotional intelligence. In fact, we're even going to do some activities together. So I'm going to ask you to work with by yourself and then together with the person sitting next to you. So be prepared. We're not going to be a passive learner tonight, okay? We're going to make sure that you're active. Just a few points. Performance Technology Solutions, the company that I work for, is a company that's focused on improving the organizational performance of our clients through their people. So we do a number of different kinds of initiatives, which I'll tell you about as we go through tonight, very casually as we discuss about emotional intelligence, how we improve this area for our clients, because it is an important aspect for organizational performance. Our clients are mainly multinational, large organizations, and also international public agencies. Who do we work for? You might recognize some of these logos. These are some of a selected number of our clients. We work across a number of different sectors, from banking. You see a logo there that's the United Nations. We've done a lot of work in terms of emotional intelligence development at the United Nations. And so I'm looking forward to sharing these kinds of examples with you through what we'll be talking about tonight. So who am I? Diane Fryman. My background is in psychology, which you probably would have guessed, something like that, a person talking about emotional intelligence, right? And I did a master's degree in an area called instructional systems design, which is actually a very kind of an engineering kind of an approach to developing training programs. It doesn't exist in Italy as a program for universities yet. It's something actually that I would like to start for the universities, so maybe we could talk about it for the Politecnico, which would be a very interesting opportunity for me, certainly. This area I've expanded in from doing just training programs to focusing on performance and performance improvement for organizations. Because a lot of things that we do related to performance within the organization are not only assisted by, let's say, this work that we can do in training. It's so much wider. It's a much bigger picture, because every organization or company is a system in and of itself. So we have to really understand all the different aspects of it. So I've done work throughout the world. I've worked with Accenture, was the beginning of my career, where I was working with change management services, today called Human Performance, I believe is the name that they use. Anybody here work with Accenture? Do you have any Accenture people? Yes, okay. So these opportunity that I had working with them certainly gave me a chance to broaden my skills from just the training design and looking at performance itself. So that's an opportunity I have to share with you. And for many years within Europe, I've been working now also as a trainer, as a coach, basically working with our clients to improve their communication skills and their emotional intelligence in general, and all these competencies that we're going to look at tonight. So we're going to have a way to actually drill down into and understand better what is this emotional intelligence. Okay, so one thing that we have is, do great specialists? This is the big first question that you're going to get to vote on, right? Do great specialists make good managers? How many people think that great specialists make good managers? Raise your hand high if you think that's true. Oh, I don't see any hands up. Okay, you guys are pretty clued in. I can see that. That's good. Actually, it doesn't mean because you're a good specialist, you can't become a good manager. You can, but certainly the focus is a very different one. So what we need to look at in organizations, and this is what we do with our clients, we help them with their selection. Is the audio okay? Because I hear some whistling. Is it bothering you, the audio?
No, it's okay.
It's okay? Okay, good. Am I going too fast? No, good. Glad to hear that. Okay, so yeah, what are the issues here? This issue of the specialist becoming the manager. Like I said, just because you're a good specialist doesn't mean you can't be a great manager. You certainly can. But soft skills play a very significant part in this transition that we have from a specialist to becoming a manager. Because all about being a manager is about doing what you have to do through people, right? So we have to be smarter and more intelligent about the work we work with people. So this is the main crux that we have here. So in particular, research that we're going to examine together has shown us that poor emotional intelligence skills are actually a stronger predictor of managerial derailment. Okay? The higher you go up in the organization, if you have poor emotional intelligence skills, then you're more likely to have difficulty as you progress up through the organization. Okay, so we're going to look at the research on that. And low emotional intelligence actually scores are related to problems that we might see that people have. It's very highly correlated with interpersonal relationships and with difficulty changing or adapting. And in today's world, that's the only word we can really count on. Change. We all know that change is something that's going to happen. So the more that we're prepared for it, and the better we are at managing it and being adaptive, the more successful we'll be. And so emotional intelligence is very much linked to this adaptability. So let's examine why the issue of this transition from specialist to manager is so difficult. Have a look here. You can see that the focus that we see here, let me see if I got my echo. The focus that we have, we're moving from task focus to people focus. We said that. Usually decision making for a specialist might be an issue related to working in inadequate information under certainty, but certainly when we're a manager, we even have to work with fuzzy information under uncertain situations, which means we basically do not have a grasp on what could happen. So navigating, as we call, the chaos. If you're interested in the slides, at the end of the program, you'll get my email address, so you can send me an email if you'd like to have them. So not to worry that you might miss out on anything. I know that you might want these. So here we go. We see that the work output usually generally is focused on the quantitative or measurable, whereas obviously the manager is more focused on qualitative issues, right? Qualitative issues. We might also see the effectiveness of a technical person is certainly based on their technical expertise, their knowledge, and so on, but the manager's expertise is related to, or their ability is related to their interpersonal skills. Very much so, because it's working through people to accomplish the task that we have to get done. So for all of these reasons, it's very important to master and to continuously develop, because it's an area that we can all continuously develop in, this emotional intelligence. So let's see what you believe about emotional intelligence today. Because you've probably heard the word, it's kind of popular in terms of it's fashionable kind of a term. So how many people actually believe that a person who is more emotional has a higher EI? Raise your hand. Yeah, could be that you think that. I just want you to answer honestly, because these are some beliefs that you might hear around. So a couple people believe that. A couple people might be also believe, or you might have known or heard about, that EI means giving free rein to our feelings and letting them dictate business actions. How many people actually believe this? No, yeah, we got some people, okay. Some people might believe this. These are all beliefs. And EI means that being nice to people. It's all about being nice to people. How many people believe that? That EI is about being nice? No? Nobody? Oh, maybe some people. Okay, I see some people might be interested in that. Our level of EI is actually, and this is a very important one, and one that we're going to look at the research. Some people might believe that your emotional intelligence is actually linked to your DNA. You're born, either you're born with it or you're not. How many people actually believe this one? Anybody? Okay, so some people actually believe that. Well, I'll tell you what, all of these things are false. So if you believe those, then wipe them out of your memory, start again, we're starting fresh, and we're going to better understand what EI is all about, because it's none of these things. So there's a bit of an evolutionary issue related to the theory. Since we're here at university, we'll talk a little bit about theory, although we're going to get into practice right away. Let's talk about Gardner and the work that was done, the first work that contributed to EI knowledge, related to multiple intelligence. Gardner actually helped and made a contribution for the understanding of the distinction that we have between interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligence. This issue about our ability to recognize in other people their feelings, their emotions, and so on, but also within ourselves. So it really kind of started back in 1983 with Gardner. And then there was developments by Rowan Baron, who actually made further developments connecting our understanding about emotional intelligence to the personality, our health, and our well-being. We're actually conducting some studies internationally right now, our company, together with our international network, to understand how people's personality can impact their well-being in the workplace. So it's a fascinating study, and hopefully when it's done, we'll have some interesting information to provide you with, so keep your eyes on that, because I'll pass it on to Christina Cancer. We just started the study with the University of Pennsylvania, and we should have more information about that probably in the fall of this year, 2014. Solovey and Meyer actually made some other, everybody pushed it along, sort of developed it further, this whole concept about emotional intelligence. And they actually made the contribution because they helped us to better understand that individual capacity to reason about emotions is actually an important aspect of processing information in order to enhance cognitive processes. So this is how they viewed it. And the biggest and probably the most well-known contributor, you've probably heard of yourself, and I'm blocking your view of the slides here, is actually related to Goleman. Maybe you've heard of Daniel Goleman. How many people have actually already heard of Daniel Goleman? Yeah, he's probably the most well-published, well-recognized theorist related to, because it's actually a theorist, practitioner, researcher, related to emotional intelligence. And our psychologist, Ken Nowak, actually works with Daniel Goleman and has designed the instruments, the tools that we use to measure emotional intelligence. The 360-degree evaluation tools and the other tools that we use are all designed by Ken Nowak, who has worked with Goleman directly. So what is it about Goleman? Why did he bring us a step further in our understanding about emotional intelligence? Well, Goleman helped us to understand a little bit better that EI is actually the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and those of other people. But it also helps us to motivate ourselves. Today, in today's workplace, self-motivation is a critical factor. All of you who are managers, wouldn't you love that your people were just automatically motivated to come to work, to give the best of themselves? That's the thing that every manager would like. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have as managers, is to motivate our people to work towards the same objectives, the aligned objectives that we have, isn't it? So this is such an important thing to look for when we're selecting, even when we're going through the selection process. Some of the big names that you saw on the logos for our clients are large companies like Barilla, UniCredit, and so on, that are using our tools so that they can improve not only the selection process, so they can select people based on their personality profiles, but also so that they can develop them better. And so this is one of the areas that we're going to explore together. EI is a wide set of competencies. We're going to look at every competency tonight, and we're going to experiment together on some of those concepts and some of those competencies. So it is absolutely not an innate talent. It is true, some people naturally have a good level already of emotional intelligence, but it doesn't mean that you cannot develop it. But we do need to work a bit, invest of ourselves, to make improvements in this, because they're highly learned habits, maybe that we have to unlearn. We have to learn new habits and new ways and competencies, and that's what some of the exercises that we're going to do tonight are actually going to assist us in better understanding. So, I think that it is clear that Danny Goleman has given us a very big push in terms of the development that we've done in this area, and the implications that we might have for selection and talent management. Also, it was training and coaching that we actually perform. So we work in all of these areas, and let's look at how it could be important to you. So how could a high level of emotional intelligence assist you? Why could it be good? It can assist you to actually inspire and motivate people. So if you need to be a person who inspires and motivates, think about working on your emotional intelligence competencies. It could also help us to build better working relationships. Obviously, it's the fundamental blocks of doing that. So we need to, another useful aspect of emotional intelligence is dealing with difficult team members. How often we're called into clients and we work with them on conflict management. You probably have seen, maybe even in your own workplace, issues related to conflict management. No? So we can learn how to manage those things better by using different techniques, but also increasing our emotional intelligence. Okay? We can leverage emotional information and make better decisions by using emotional intelligence, because it allows us also to be sensitive to what's happening around us and with our colleagues, and also to include them, to be more inclusive with them, to gather better information when we're making our decisions. And clearly, it's a way to communicate more effectively. Because if I'm in touch with what's happening with me, and I understand what's happening for you, it's probably, I might change the way that I'm interacting with you based on my understanding of where we are at that level. So if I get a sense of tension, or I can modify and change the way that I am because I'm sensitive to that, and I can empathize. These are some of the skills that we talk about when we talk about emotional intelligence. Is we can create a more positive working environment and certainly keep morale higher. So working morale is such an important thing. We're working now with a medium-sized company, and I'm doing individual meetings with all of the individuals in the administrative departments and also in the marketing departments and so on. And I discover through my conversations with them about what they talk about, sort of a difficulty that they're feeling right now. I wanted to say it malessere, which is Italian. Sort of this unwell situation, a bit sick, you know, so they might be having difficulty. And the reason that can happen for many reasons. It could happen in a transition period where objectives are not clear and management is not communicating effectively about those changes. That can create a malaise in our people. So communication is the most important thing. Even when we don't know what's going to happen, we have to be able to, in some way, inform our people about what is happening, at least to the best of our knowledge of that. And if we're able to do that, then we can keep morale higher. Because when there's this shift between management and what management knows and what everybody else knows, if there's a gap in that, that's where we start to see a lot of difficulty in the organization. We like to anticipate and avoid any kind of emotional upset. So these are the kinds of things that you can count on if you're developing your emotional intelligence. Let's look at some of the research. So we're going to find out about why it is that it can improve even businesses and business performance if we can improve our own emotional intelligence. Leaders' competencies, emotional competencies, have a relevant impact, very much so, on the effectiveness that they are as leaders, and therefore the impact that they have on the organization. So Goleman actually did research, and this was back in 98. In previous years, you can find, there's a bibliography at the very end of my slides, so you'll get more information about the research if you're interested in understanding yourself directly. But he determined through his research that emotional intelligence is twice as important in determining outstanding performance. In other words, using defined by these measurable business results as technical skills. So it's more important to have emotional intelligence than technical skills when it comes to being a manager and moving up the ladder, as we said before. He also found through his research, and we're going to look at the details related to this, that the importance of emotional intelligence in increasing as the job levels advance, and emotional intelligence as it distinguishes outstanding leaders and strong performers. We can also see that in senior leaders, EI, emotional intelligence, is accountable for 90% of the differences in profiles of outstanding and average performers. So where we see emotional intelligence is present, we might see a better performer in the job of an executive. Leaders with high EI scores are also positively impacting company performance. And would you believe, and this is hard to imagine, that 70% of employees' perception about organizational climate, that's the mood that we have in the organization, is their perception of organizational climate is actually associated with the EI of the leader. We're going to look at that research in particular. I've got 4 slides here, all about the business cases for why we should be developing emotional intelligence. So, top performers are more productive, top performance and emotional competencies that make them that way. So it's their emotional intelligence that's making them a top performer. The difference is that. What did we find? That in the research, we know that when we have a skill set or a job level, which is a medium complexity, like sales clerks or with mechanics, a top performer is 12 times more productive than those at the bottom, okay, of the EI scale. And 85% are more productive than an average performer. So EI is even important in lower level skill jobs, but also in higher level skill jobs, like, or complex jobs, like insurance salespeople and account managers, who have to, the top performer is 127% more productive than an average performer, and this is some research that comes from Hunter Schmidt and Dudesh in 1990. We see competency research of over 200 companies conducted by Goleman and the organization worldwide, that 1/3 of the difference is due to technical skills, but 2/3 is actually due to emotional competencies. So if we want to see top performers and top organizations, then emotional intelligence has a larger impact than even technical competencies. Okay, so top leaders' positions, over 4/5 of the differences is due to emotional competence. And so that's what we mean by emotional intelligence. L'Oreal, which is a company that you probably all know, maybe you buy their products, you might have them in your bathroom, like I do. L'Oreal actually did a research related to their selection process. They improved their selection process and increased their sales by looking for emotional intelligence competencies while they were selecting. So they actually were able to, through applying their research for the selection, improve the amount of sales. You can see the figures here. I don't want to dwell too long on the research, but it certainly is, and you can see the impact also on the organization. They increased the sales and they lowered turnover. Because the people that they selected that had a higher level emotional intelligence, they were able to engage them more readily because they were highly focused also on these skills. And so they had a lower turnover rate of individuals. Turnover is a very expensive cost for organizations. When you have a person that comes and goes, of course you might be thinking, well, in these days it's hard to hold a job, and so people aren't leaving their organization. even if they're not leaving their organization, if we're not engaging them as leaders, we might be losing them even if they're sitting physically with us. So if they're not engaged and productive on the job, then you might as well not have them on the job. But getting them off the payroll, especially in Italy, would be a very hard task. So what we need to do is to engage our employees to the highest level to make sure that everybody is making a contribution to what the bottom line is. So emotional intelligence can help to prevent executive derailment. We talked about this before. And this research comes from the Center for Creative Leadership that have found some primary causes for the derailment are actually due to these 3 points that you see below, which is difficulty in handling change, not maybe being able to work well in teams, and also poor interpersonal relations. So even executives, as they move up the line, and I've coached a number of them in large organizations like you saw already, have issues with managing the relationships, working upward to upper management when they make shifts from maybe a middle management position to upper management. So it continues to be an important issue in career development. It's not something certainly to be ignored. 2 more slides and we're finished with our business cases. I thought it was important for you to be convinced about the contributions that the competency development makes in the organization, because many people don't think that it's measurable because they don't understand how it works. So that's why I wanted to give you these statistics and this information. So supervisors' EI training led to productivity gains in manufacturing. When they trained supervisors in a manufacturing environment about emotional intelligence and the competencies related to such, they were able to lower what they call lost time accidents. You know what that is, lost time accidents? Yeah? Okay, so some people might not know. I see some faces. Lost time accidents are when we lose time on the job due to an accident on the job. So they were actually lowered the number of accidents that occurred on the job. In Italy, this is a very important subject. Safety, a lot of deaths due to, unfortunately, poor or lower level of importance given to the security or safety that our workers have. So they were actually able to lower that by improving the supervisor's listening skills. So empathy skills. This is an important thing to recognize. And also to lower the number of grievances or complaints that people make per year from 15 to 3 in a year. So this is actually some statistics you can find there. And emotional intelligence can be a powerful predictor of success within senior executive positions. So if we can measure and identify who has a very good level of emotional intelligence, either because they've been working on developing it or because they naturally have it, they could be identified as talent within the organization that we want to work on developing within their career. So Zender is a company you probably heard about. I know they're in Italy as well. It's an executive recruiting company. And actually they found that looking for strong EI in their candidates was a better predictor of success than their relevant previous experience they had with high IQ. So if they were looking for people that were very strong competencies, very intelligent before, they found that shifting to look at the skills that are emotional intelligence was a much more important predictor for executive success. So that's some statistics about that. We've got lots of cases about emotional intelligence and its impact on the organization. Also in the perceptions of work stress that people have. People often talk about stress in the workplace. Well, we can lower the stress that's in the workplace also through what's done in emotional intelligence research. Our partners, business partners, in Visia Learning, which is actually our psychologist Ken Nowak's company in the United States, did this research which actually helped us to understand that people could improve, we could improve the job retention, we could improve employee retention, employees' engagement, and also their perception of stress if we can improve the emotional intelligence and competencies within management. So we actually saw a very strong correlation between the leaders in the organization being more emotionally intelligent, having the impact on what's significantly less likely to consider leaving. So we could lower the turnover, as we said before. So this came up also in the studies, lowering stress and lowering turnover of personnel by improving managers' emotional intelligence. One more very important aspect of your understanding of emotional intelligence is to understand that there's a connection scientifically. We have research now available that tells us that EI is very much a physical issue in our brain. How many of you actually know what the amygdala is? The amygdala, have you ever heard of the amygdala? No? Yeah, some people have heard about it. You remember studying biology in the brain? It's a very important aspect. It's the center for emotional response, because actually mammals and human beings who have had the amygdala removed do not show any emotional signs of emotional feeling at all. So if you've had your amygdala removed, you wouldn't feel any sadness, you wouldn't feel any pain, you wouldn't feel any of these other issues related to emotions. But it would be a bit sad. Wouldn't it be a bit bland world if we didn't have our emotions? We like to have those emotions, but they're so important, these emotions to us. And one thing that Goleman has taught us about this amygdala, what he calls the amygdala hijack. How many of you in the workplace have experienced a person who was extremely aggressive and they scream their heads off? They're just constantly screaming and attacking people. Anybody in the room have seen? Oh, this is the amygdala hijack. Okay? When that person loses control completely of him or herself, and we've seen this in many organizations and had to work with many managers on this level. I myself have been subjected to a partner, I won't name any partners in the previous organization that I worked in the South Pacific area, Singapore, who would actually take objects and throw them at people if he lost it. And why does this happen? What we know from brain research is that the amygdala, it's the third point here, we can have a threat that might be perceived. Only perceived threat. And this can be different for everybody based on their own way of looking at things, okay? That they feel threatened somehow. For example, the throwing of the object, or the threat of maybe the project might have some difficulty, or maybe the client might have some concerns. But they might blow it out of proportion because the amygdala, as we see here, the amygdala can override the neocortex, which is the center of the higher thinking, and initiate an inappropriate emotional response, okay, that the person will certainly later regret. And if they're not regretting it, we need to really work on it, because they need to be regretting it. Those kinds of behaviors that probably 90% of the room has seen, because I saw you all raise your hands, it's something we need to be working on. That is not appropriate. And we're going to talk about that in our exercise we're going to do this evening. So on some levels, the human brain certainly does not distinguish between the genuine threat that we might have to our life or health and the subjective threat, such as loss of job status. There's a question.
Excuse me. Instead of threat, can it be related with anger?
Could it be related to anger? Yes, but anger is an emotional response. What EI helps us to do is recognize that we have anger and then manage our anger so that we can therefore manage our relationships better with other people. Because we can all learn to manage our anger. Okay? So this is when the amygdala goes out of control, it takes over the neocortex, and we get these crazy responses like people throwing things and screaming their heads off. Right. So let's look now at the competencies. We're finally getting to the competencies, self-awareness. This is one of the biggest, the heart of the EI model, and certainly the influence that we have on developing the competencies that we have here. So it enables our understanding of our own behavior like if we have anger, what we were saying now, and helps us to sustain our behavior even when there are setbacks. A setback is basically when things don't go the way that we wanted them to go. And we know, and we can improve people's growth mindset. We can improve their way of looking at things so that they can bounce back more quickly after a setback. So that's the issue. Remember we talked about adaptability is one of our biggest factors that's part of emotional intelligence, is adaptability. So when things don't go the way we want to, how quickly do we jump back? This is one of our important things. So self-awareness, self-management. I used the example before with anger. It's how we effectively manage our own emotions and how well we control our responses to new or challenging situations. Then we expand from ourself, because it all starts with ourself, our self-awareness, and then we expand out socially. And then we're going to look at the model. Social awareness allows us to be more aware of other people's feelings and needs and concerns, and that obviously will have an impact on how we manage the relationship with other people, this ability to apply the emotional understanding of our relationships with other people, and it's the visible side of the emotional intelligence, which is underpinning the competencies, which are in 3 different clusters. So let's do a drill down into the competencies. I want you to be very aware. Remember we started out the evening saying we want to be able to understand what are those components of this emotional intelligence. So in self-awareness, we're talking about our emotional self-awareness, our accurate self-assessment, okay, and our self-confidence. These are all parts of self-awareness. And we work with our clients to help them to increase their self-awareness, and we do that through using assessment tools. I told you about the company that recently that we're working with, going through, speaking to all the individuals. They've used this assessment tool called Facet 5, which is a Big 5 tool for identifying individuals' characteristics. And I always start out by asking the person after they see the model what they think their questionnaire looks like. And this helps me to understand how self-aware they are. So many people guess what their profile will look like, but some people don't guess that. And so that means they're a little bit further away from their self-awareness. And by using the reports that we have with the profiling, they learn a lot about who they are and how other people could perceive them sometimes. So that's an important part about self-awareness. Self-management, that's all about this self-control. We talked about that anger control. Trustworthiness. We used at our client, the United Nations, the way that we began working with the United Nations is that we were invited in to do what they call a 360-degree evaluation from the president to the middle managers on competencies, many that are listed here in the self-management area, like trustworthiness, conscientiousness, adaptability, here achievement, drive, and initiative. These are all related to emotional intelligence. Everything that you see on the screen is all emotional intelligence, okay? It's the self-management part of that. We're going to do an activity on that this evening after we get through the model part. Social awareness. This is where we shift from, okay, now I've got it, my self-awareness, how I'm going to manage it. Now I shift to what impact does it have with others? Empathy. Empathy is a critical aspect about social awareness. So using the tools that we have, the assessment tools, we can actually measure people's level of empathy. And this is an important part of being a manager, being able to empathize with your colleagues, to pick up on their emotions, and to connect with them, okay? Service orientation, the ability to serve others, to meet their needs. Organizational awareness, these are all considered social awareness competencies, okay? As part of the model. And the very last part, relationship management, developing others, influencing them, communicating with them, conflict management. leadership, okay? Change catalyst, and building bonds and teamwork and collaboration. All of these are competencies that we need to develop to have a stronger EI. So we talked about how important emotional intelligence is to have a good performance as an individual, but also as an organization. And these skills are very much a part of that. So part of the approach that we use when we work with organizations to improve their emotional intelligence, what you see in the corner here is EI View 360. This is a 360-degree tool that we use to measure all of those competencies that you just saw. So does everybody know what 360 means in evaluation terms? Everybody familiar with 360? A few hands go up. Okay, 360-degree evaluation is when we use an evaluation to measure people's competencies, ask the individual to measure their own or to evaluate their own competencies in these areas. Ask their boss to measure or to give an evaluation of the individual based on these competencies. Ask their same level or their peers to give feedback, and then ask their employees. So 360 in the sense that it's all around the individual. So everybody in the organization that has contact with that individual gives their point of view about how they perceive this individual, okay, and their behaviors and competencies in emotional intelligence. So we use this in a program that we have. These are some of the learning objectives that we have for the program, but we use a very pragmatic approach. So what do? We start with the organization, we look and we do assessment. Then, from the assessment, we focus on training. Okay? Actually, this slide is in Italian, isn't it? So training. And then we use coaching sometimes. Otherwise, we always use follow-up, because follow-up is such a critical part of engaging people in their own improvement. And if it's not being done, you've probably seen it yourself when they're doing training or coaching. If we're not following up to measure or to look at those competencies and the development of those competencies, then people lose interest and they don't focus on achieving the objective. So we use this very pragmatic approach to it. So now I'm just going to give you a drill down into emotional competencies. We're going to do an exercise. I told you we're going to get a chance to do an exercise here. But before we do that, let's just look at what we're looking at here is emotional self-awareness, which is recognizing our own emotions and their effects. Accurate self-assessment. Remember I told you the example of what happens when we're working with people about that. How if you know your strengths and your limits, and self-confidence. Your self-confidence, which is your sureness about your self-worth and your capabilities. Summarize, what did you learn from doing the exercise? Different people have different reactions and feelings in different situations. Emotions can't transcend cultural boundaries. Different layers within actions. So we're going to see that the next area of competencies. Now, the self-management competencies are many. Look at this long list. Emotional self-control is managing disruptive emotions and impulses. Trustworthiness is something that you all understand, but maintaining standards of honesty and integrity. This is a tough one culturally sometimes. Conscientiousness, taking responsibility for our personal performance. Adaptability, the flexibility in handling change. Achievement drive, which is that strive to improve or meet a standard of excellence. And initiative, which is our readiness to act on opportunities. What you learned from this exercise, losing control can provoke others to lose control. If others don't show their own emotional intelligence. The social awareness competencies. The social awareness competencies are empathy, service orientation, and organizational awareness. So with empathy, we can sense others' feelings and perspective and take an active interest in their concerns. In service orientation, we anticipate, recognize, and meet other people's needs. And with organizational awareness, we understand the power that relationships have in one's group or within the organization. So these are the competencies that make up the social awareness area of the model. The relationship management competencies are developing others, so that means promoting long-term learning and development of others, influencing others, in other words, using effective tactics for persuasion, the kind of thing that you know that salespeople need, but also good managers need, the ability to persuade. Are you surprised about that? Communication, sending clear and convincing messages, conflict management, negotiating and resolving disagreements, leadership, which is obviously inspiring and guiding groups and people, having a change catalyst or being the person who can initiate or manage change, building bonds or nurturing instrumental relationships, and teamwork and collaboration. So all of these competencies make up part of the relationship management competencies. Your learnings from this exercise. We're always communicating. Even when we think we're not communicating, we're still communicating. Empathy for others. We need to respect each other when we're communicating. So that means also the empathy and recognizing that somebody's communicating in nonverbal or showing other symptoms, and we need to recognize it and pick up on it because it could be useful to us. Be aware about your impact when you're communicating. Okay, good. So those were big learnings, and I saw lots of good activity. You guys have been a fantastic group. Thank you very much for your attention.